Welcome, everybody, to yet another live interview with Become a Fearless Father. And right now, I have the pleasure to being accompanied by the founder of Dad Hackers, Patrick Antonucci. I hope I said that right.
Yep.
And Patrick, thanks so much for joining me. I know you're really busy and you just came back from an earlier appointment, driving through crazy traffic. So I really appreciate that. Before we introduce you, Patrick, I got a question because I was checking earlier today. I was checking out your profile and your group and your page and everything. First of all, I love what you're doing.
Thanks, man.
Very important. And second, something stood out to me, and I was like, I gotta ask this first before we start. Multi-generational look. I gotta look at my paper, man. Multi-generational legacy.
Yeah.
I read that. I was like, whew. I gotta ask that first, man. What does that mean? How does that look like? Please share your philosophy on this because I'm really, really dying to know.
Yeah, sure, man. So, first off, a lot of times we as dads can just be so focused and driven on our business or on our side hustle or in our work that we don't even give much thought to raising the children in ways that we have as like an intrinsic responsibility to raise our children.
Mm-hmm.
And that's on the first level. But then on another level, some guys think, okay, I got to raise my children to be good adults, which is true. And that's a great ambition to have. And I would applaud guys for that and say, yes, you want to raise your children to be good adults, you don't want to have good children. You want to raise good adults because eventually when you launch your children out into the world, they're going to be adults. And so that's kind of the game plan there. But then if you take that a step further, if you look multi-generationally to be thinking about your children, your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, in thinking about what you could be doing today in the multi-generational impact that will have, and having that more of a longer range perspective. Take the analogy of investments, for example. A lot of times we think of investments as I got to invest for retirement or my kids' college funding. Well, let's take that a step further. What's the inheritance that you're going to leave, not just for your children, but for your grandchildren, perhaps even your great-grandchildren? And what things are you putting into place now so that generations that follow can be blessed from it, not just you at retirement and not just your first generation of children? So that's kind of like a brief synopsis of the multi-generational approach to fatherhood, is to think beyond just your children in the generational impact that you can have. There's a guy, his name, I'm pretty sure it's Jonathan Edwards, and he lived a couple hundred years ago, and he was a preacher and everything like that. But they traced his descendants down multiple generations, and it was just amazing the people that came through his descendants. And I mean, it was like presidents of colleges, people that were in high level of politics and influencers, and people in society that were looked up to. And then they traced this other guy, and I can't remember his name, and most people can't, who was who his generational impact was very shady. Lots of convicts, lots of prostitution, lots of people in jail. And they just compared the two guys and their descendants and the multi-generational impacts that proceeded from what those guys had done. And one guy was obviously intentional about how he raised his children and had a multi-generational view toward things. And then the other guy just lived by default rather than by design. And you could see the destruction that ensued from that. So I don't know how long you wanted me to go on that, but that's kind of a little bit of a detailed answer up to that question. It was an excellent question. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, well, I think the answer was even more brilliant. Look, man, I love this. So boom, Christopher immediately responds to what you were just saying.
Oh, thanks, Christopher.
Inspirational. Absolutely, man. That was not just inspirational. That was powerful, dude. I have never, that's why I'm like, I gotta ask this for, look, man, I'm getting goosebumps. I'm not kidding. Right? I never, like, I think about, you know how people, well, one, they don't even think about tomorrow, right? So
Right.
that's the first step. We think about tomorrow. Then there's some people that think about, you know, what's going on next week. And then you have the people, of course, that think about what am I going to do this weekend, because that's the most fun, right?
Yeah.
And then there's some that like thinking about, okay, what's my 90 days plan or my 5-year plan? You know, I got a vision of how I want things. I have never thought of starting to think on that level up until like now that you explain it. I'm like, I got to do that. That is so powerful. That will make you just explode in your thinking. Like, because your whole mindset, it will switch completely. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's,
And then,
go ahead,
you can begin to reverse engineer when you have the end in mind and really think and break it down into actionable steps that you can take today that you might not see the results of those incremental little steps and details in the short run. But if you have a viewpoint of what you want the end result to be, you can take better steps toward that. So for example, one of the things that I like to do with my children is I have 5 children, and we do daddy time. And I do one child each day of the week, Monday through Friday. And so today is Wednesday, and I actually missed my confession here. I actually missed my daddy time with my younger son yesterday. And so I just got home from my event from work, and he was like, "We gonna be able to do daddy time today?" And he wants to go to the bike trail and ride bikes. And that's just what it is. It's intentional one-on-one time with my son. And that's what we call daddy time. And my wife has mommy time with our children as well. And it doesn't have to cost anything. It doesn't have to be this big, long, elaborate plan. And in fact, I would advise you don't make it that, because the more complicated and expensive you make it, the less likely you're going to be to do it or to stick with it and be consistent. And, you know, every daddy time isn't like the greatest thing that the child's ever done in their entire life. No, but doing them consistently week in and week out, and yeah, we miss here and there. We're not perfect, but doing them week in and week out consistently has really helped me develop a relationship with my children. They look forward to it. They know it's going to happen, and they actually hold me accountable to it, because they know when their day of the week is that we do daddy time, and so they're asking me about it, and they're looking forward to it. And, you know, I know different guys have different schedules. Some guys travel, some guys are out of town for, you know, a week at a time, and you just tweak and work with what you have. But investing in your children now is going to reap benefits later. Just like with a monetary investment, if you put a little bit aside and invest it from your paycheck each week, or each month, whatever, after 40 years of doing that consistently, you're going to have quite a nice nest egg once you retire, or, you know, once you begin to take withdrawals on that. And you might not be able to see the immediate return on that for years down the road. But, you know, when it comes to finances, we know that's what we need to do. And in the long run, those small incremental changes pile up to something great in the end. Same thing with being a dad. Same thing.
Love it. Yeah. I'm really glad that you talked about this. It's very important. And actually, my earlier interview was also mentioning we were talking about intentional, you know, being intentional with your kids. You know, that's one of the most important things. And that's, sorry, before I forget, before I flip out here and have no more battery in my computer.
Yeah, I got to plug it in.
That is what overcomes the danger, right? Because one of the things that I've noticed when I became a dad for the first time, right? When it's like, it's so small, what do I do with this, right? It's like, okay, hopefully it just, you know, when it's 2 and it can walk, then I can do stuff with him. And then he was 2 and it's like, okay, well, hopefully he becomes 3 and then he can talk, so we can actually, you know, and then it continues, right? If you don't be careful, it continues. But what you're saying is you're intentional now. That is going to actually make you be able to later on do all those things that you're thinking about now, right?
Exactly. And then one of the biggest influencers on children is their parents. And oftentimes children will do what their parents did. I was just talking to a guy earlier today, and he's like, if you, play ball with your son, he's probably going to play ball with his son. And he was like, if you're a crackhead, your kid's probably going to turn out to be a crackhead as well. Well, you can apply that across the whole spectrum of parenting. And so this is how you can kind of think multi-generationally, is being intentional with my children now is going to influence how they are with their children, and so forth and so on. If I get home and I'm distracted, my head's buried in my phone, and I just, and completely detached, I'm physically there, but I'm just completely detached all the time. And I get home and I, like I said, bury your head in the phone, or just read a book, or watch the game on TV, whatever it is, your kids are going to pick up on that. And they're probably going to stay in that same cycle of dysfunction, if you will, or disengagement. But if you're intentional, then the same theory applies. That's probably going to be passed on to the next generation. And I see it as my wife and I building a foundation that our kids can then build upon that. And hopefully not have to go through the same struggles and baggage that we did, and the same fights and battles, but that they can move on to bigger and greater ones and progress and move the needle forward. And then their children can build upon that structure. And just, I see it as an upward spiral of function rather than the downward spiral of dysfunction that we see in a lot of families today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Man, I was going to say I love it, but I think other people could say way better. Man, we definitely hit a subject that is dear to the audience. So that's awesome.
Awesome, man. Awesome.
So I appreciate that, man. We're almost 50 minutes in, and we haven't even introduced you or gone into who's Patrick. So
sure, man.
Yeah. So Patrick, share with us, man. What's your background story? Oh, wait, look at that. And then Ben Kilo is here as well. You make an impact in your kid's life in as little as 10 minutes at a time.
Sure. Yeah.
Love it.
Ben's a great guy. He and I are friends. We've talked multiple times. He's an excellent guy, and he's definitely a devoted father. Yeah.
Absolutely great. Well, he's going to be on here pretty soon, so I can't wait to get Ben on. Thanks, Ben, for being here. I appreciate you, brother. So again, Patrick, share us your background story, most of all, to make the rest of the interview click and for people to understand. Share with us as well what's your family setup. You already mentioned, I think you got 5 kids, but share a little bit of their ages, their daughters or sons, and how long you've been married.
Sure. Yeah. So my wife and I have just celebrated our 15-year wedding anniversary. We actually got 3 days away. 3 days away, and it was a blast. We just got back a week ago today, so that was really awesome. We have 5 children. Our oldest is 12. His name's Silas. Then Lydia is 11. Naomi is 9.5. Abram is 7, and Sarai just turned 4. So we have 5 kiddos. And if you know your Bible, you probably heard those are all Bible names. We are Christians. I run a community called Dad Hackers. It's for Christian dads who want to become more of who they were called and created to be. And, I do a podcast as well for that. And we interview a lot of dads on that podcast as well. And we're all about encouraging, equipping, and building up men so that they can lead their families and like you said, have that multi-generational impact and actually fulfill the duty that they're called to do. So I give you more background on my life and other stuff if you want. I'm an open book, so ask away.
Nice. I like that. Appreciate that. What made you start Dad Hackers? Love the cap, by the way.
Yeah, you noticed that. Yeah.
yeah, definitely noticed that.
My wife got that for me for Father's Day.
Oh, sweet. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I try to wear it a lot, breaking it in rather. So yeah, I didn't grow up in a Christian home.
Okay.
And I became a Christian when I was about 13 years old. And my parents were divorced when I was 5. I still have a good relationship with both of my parents. It just, they could not be together. It just didn't work out for whatever reasons. But now that I have a family of my own, I've been married, like I said, 15 years. We have the 5 kids. And as I walk through the journey of fatherhood, I'm realizing that I kind of don't have any idea of what I'm doing. And like I said, I come from a Christian perspective. And so I don't have the context of growing up in a Christian home to kind of fall back on. I don't have the example of a Christian family, Christian marriage, a Christian upbringing. But I want that for my children. I want that for my family. I want that for my marriage. And I know a lot of other guys are in the same boat. And so what I did was, I know that guys do better when they're together. That's why we go to battle in battle teams. That's why we have sports teams. That's why men just rally together and they can encourage, inspire, and motivate one another. And there's a verse in the Bible, Proverbs 27:17. It says, "As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another." And I take that extremely literally. And so I started Dad Hackers with an eye toward gathering around myself other men who are on this same journey of fatherhood and manhood and just want to become who they're called to be. I feel like in a lot of men, we know we have a lot of potential, but we're like handcuffed at tapping into that potential. And we feel like this calling to be the leader in our homes. We feel the calling to be the leader in our marriage, in the leader of our children, and to raise them well. But a lot of us have no idea what to do, where to turn, how to start, who to ask, or whatever. So I decided I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to start a community of other men who are on the same trajectory or on the same journey, whatever you want to call it. And I just created a free Facebook group and just invited guys I knew and encouraged them to invite guys that they know. And we have a very nice Facebook group now that's hopping along. And then I was trying to think what's the best way that I can add value to the group, to the community. And I was doing some research into social media and YouTube and podcasting. And I landed on podcasting because people tend to listen to a whole podcast most of the time. And podcasting is growing. The listener base is growing. So I felt like that would be the most efficient, effective use of my time would be to create a podcast. So I interview guys who are older, 2 types of guys. I like to interview guys that have an expertise in a certain area that's relevant to manhood, to fatherhood, to Christianity as men. And I also like to interview men who have kind of passed the test, so to speak, and they're more on the tail end of life, and they have children who now have grandchildren, and they're in the process of doing the multi-generational impact that I want to have with my children. And I love to pick their brains and see what they did and their mindset and those types of things. And so that's kind of what we got going on with Dad Hackers.
Yeah, because the group's like 2K already, 2,000.
I wish, man. We just had 1,100 in the
11,
group.
My mistake. Okay, great. But still, man, that's insane. That's absolutely awesome.
Yeah, it's great. Very good conversations going on in there all the time.
Please post a link to that Facebook group. Oh, man, I will. See Nicholas asking, please post a Facebook. You're absolutely right. And I didn't do that. I didn't even turn it into a banner because I'm crazy with lives. It will be in there, Nicholas. Thank you. I will reply it to you and share that link. You're absolutely right. I will look for it in a little bit. I
have a website, dadhackers.us. And if you just go to dadhackers.us, there's links for how to get into everything there.
Oh, there you go.
So it's real easy.
Yeah, exactly. So dadhackers.us, right? There you go. See, we can do that. Look, and we can do this. So there you go. Did I spell that correctly? Yeah, I did that good, right?
You sure did.
So
that's awesome, man. I like that.
Thanks, man. It's easy to promote. It looks pretty good too. So dadhackers.us. Now you guys know. Check it out, and that way you can get access to the group and you can get access to to Patrick himself, right? It makes it easy. I will show it again later on when we go into the part of, how they can connect with you, etc. Cool. So, one thing that you said, iron sharpens iron. I don't know if you heard of Aaron Walker.
Yeah, I actually interviewed him on the podcast a while back. He's an awesome dude.
Absolutely, man. I was actually going to ask you that if you had interviewed him, because if you're not, I would definitely introduce you because he is amazing. He's one of the first I interviewed, and just blew my mind away. Absolutely.
Yeah. When his show came out, I mean, it skyrocketed right to #1 as far as downloads on my podcast at the time, and it's remained up in the pretty high as far as downloads for different episodes. And I mean, he just connected with so many guys on the things that he had to share about life, and just getting real raw a couple of times. And
absolutely,
awesome guy. Yeah,
he's got some experience to share. So. Definitely. That's great. And his business called Iron Sharpens Iron. So you just explaining about that made me click even more to what his company name is and what he's trying to do. So that was awesome. So I appreciate that. So in regards to whatever you're explaining, multi-general legacy and all that stuff, we talked about, being a dad, etc. But what is for you the definition when it comes down to fatherhood? And mostly, let me share with you what I've heard, what most people think. Great. You're welcome, Nicholas. So I've always seen people see okay, I got to serve my family. And the best way to do that is to go work, make money, and then make sure that everybody's provided for, right? And although that is, it is what it is for some fathers, it's not my philosophy. But I'm just wondering, what's your philosophy in regards to fatherhood?
Yeah, so I think providing for your family materially is good. But unfortunately, I feel like a lot of dads just stop there, and they don't provide in other ways for their family that they're supposed to. And I'm not trying to diss them or anything like that. I think it's just I think it's just the prevailing mindset and mentality in our culture that, you go to work and you provide the money for your family and then you've done your duty. But, there's a verse in the Bible that talks about fathers discipline and instruct your children in the ways of the Lord. And I think that's a two-pronged approach to fatherhood. Number one is discipline your children. And when I say that, I hesitate to just use the word discipline, because discipline often evokes this idea of I'm just spanking my children, or I'm just yelling at them, or I'm taking away their video games, mostly just punishment for all intents and purposes. But if you really break down what discipline is, and it's more of training them how to function in the world. And so that actually takes a lot more forethought, a lot more energy, a lot more intentionality than just yelling at your kids to, quit hitting your sister, or be nice when you talk to your mother, or I'm going to take your video games away for a month. And just all these empty threats that oftentimes dads don't follow through with anyway. And then what happens is we get frustrated with our kids, we snap, and we just begin screaming and yelling. And I'm guilty, I'm not before. I'm not perfect, but I think a lot of us are missing that teaching component to fatherhood. A lot of us are missing that training component to fatherhood. A lot of guys are coaches for sports teams or know how to coach. If we would apply that same concept to our parenting, as seeing a dad in one sense as a coach of his children, I think that we would do a lot better. And a coach has his players practice. He instructs them in certain techniques, in certain if you think of baseball, how to hold the bat, how to hold your elbow, your stance, and those different things. And keeping your eye on the ball. And, we could go with that analogy all day. But if you apply that same coaching mentality to fatherhood and how you're trying to teach and train your children to be, I think we'd be a lot more successful. And then there's that instruction aspect, which kind of overlaps with what I was saying with discipline. But if you think of instruction, lots of times we think of, you go to school and you take a class, or you go to college and you enroll in a course for this or that. And that's how you can kind of think of your fatherhood, as you are an instructor, but you're instructing your children. In my context as a Christian father, I'm going to be instructing them in the ways of God and of Jesus, but in a more broad sense of how to function in society. And it's not just sit down and you listen to my lecture. A lot of that boils down to the example that I set in my home. We talked about how children often do what their parents did. And if I'm a screamer and a yeller, guess what? My kids are probably going to be screamers and yellers. And I see that happening with my own children on both ends of the spectrum. Some of my character faults and the dysfunction that I'm still working on, I see that unfortunately unfolding in their lives as well. But a lot of the good things that I've been working on in myself, I see it being reproduced in my children. And so just as we physically reproduce with our wives and have children, physically have children, we also reproduce ourselves in our children by the example that we set, by the words that we say, by how we treat them. And our own character is then reproduced in one way, shape, or form in our children. Again, sorry for the long-winded answer, and I may have gotten off track there a little bit, but there you go.
Oh man, I love long-winded answers. People always apologize. Oh, I'm sorry I went on a rant. I'm just sitting there like, no, I love it. Keep going. Because that's when, like, the real passion, feelings, and all that stuff comes out. And that's when or at least it's my opinion, but I think that's when people can really, really pick out golden nuggets. And you just shared, man. I loved it. Yeah, man, kids are like a mirror, right? Oh yeah. Yep. And they reflect it all. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I saw it again today, man, and it was lovely. And it's so important. And if we're open to that, right, it will help us again to evolve faster. Which then again, what you say, like, with the I would keep wanting to say multiverse, multiverse legacy, the multi-generation legacy, that will help us then again to make sure that, that continues to grow even at a faster scale as well, right? So, exactly. Yeah, man, I really, truly enjoy that. I had a question, I lost it. That I came up. Well, I'll just keep going with the topics that I have now, man. You mentioned several times talking about intentional, right? One of the things that came up a little bit earlier when you were talking about that is like, look, there's a lot of dads, as you know, dadpreneurs, that are now listening and like, man, my son's now, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, 10, maybe 13, right? And I've never done this, right? What's your advice there? What would you say to those that are like struggling and are like, yeah, that sounds nice, but I don't know what to do? What would be their first step, for example? Sure. So I would first off start by saying it's never too late. Even if your kids are out of the house, grown up, and you have grandkids, it's still not too late to be an influence in your children's lives. And it's not too late to kind of turn things around with the relationship. Mm-hmm. As far as being intentional, particularly for dadpreneurs and guys that are busy, think about it from the perspective of how you do things in your own business. Like, you plan, you probably reflect, you probably look at data, you probably look at reports, you probably do some writing. I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do in business and in the entrepreneurial space, if we could translate that over to our parenting, a lot of it would translate very, very well as far as intentionality. Mm-hmm. So
let's just take social media posting. Maybe you plan out your social media posts a week in advance, a month in advance, or maybe you do delegate that out to somebody, but it's probably getting scheduled out.
Mm-hmm.
We can be intentional with our children, just like I was talking about with the daddy time. We have that scheduled out and planned. I might not have exactly what I'm going to do planned with every child, but it's an appointment on my calendar every day through the weekdays.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how, and it's in there, and it's important.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to, one way that we can be intentional is to guard the time that we set aside for our children. I'm currently reading a book by Michael Hyatt called Free to Focus, and he's just totally blown up my mind with all of this stuff. And he's talking about how lots of times guys will work 60, 70, 80 hours in a week and think they're more productive, when actually after about 50 hours a week, you start to become less productive than if you just work 40 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
And so lots of times we feel like that if we're just busy, we're being productive, but often that's not the case. And so you have to make sure that what you're doing is focused and intentional, at work, so that you have some margin in your life, so that you can be intentional with your children and in your marriage and in the important relationships in your life, and guard those appointments and guard that margin, just like you would guard an important meeting with maybe a client or maybe a potential client or maybe somebody you're collaborating with or an employee or something like that. Those appointments are going to be on your calendar and you're going to fulfill those. But for some reason, we feel lots of times like things that we commit to with our family are much more flexible and fluid, and it's okay. I'll just take them on a big trip over the summer and make up for it all. And that's not going to be the case. You have to intentionally invest time, quantities of time. And I'll say this as well, just as a mindset type of thing. Lots of times we're after quality time with our kids, but the catch is what we think is quality time for them might not be quality time for them. They might just see it as a run-of-the-mill experience. Sometimes we plan these big elaborate vacations to Disney or crazy destinations and spend all this money, and we're like, this is going to be quality family time. And it might be for you, but it might not be for your child. And the catch is that you never know what quality time with your child is. You never know what it's going to be for them. So how you work around that is you have to invest quantities of time. You see, the more time you spend with your kids and you're engaged, the more likely you are to hit those quality time moments. And then you'll hear about it on the back end. You'll be like, Dad, you remember that one time that we went to such and such a place? And you're like, yeah, but you've already, but for them, it was like a great experience. And it was probably something you didn't spend any money on. And it was probably a time where it was just you and them, and you actually engaged and listened and participated and were there and were present. And they just loved it. They just ate it up. But we never know when those are coming for them because we're not them, obviously. So quality time is found in the quantity of time. And you're not going to have as much quantity of time if you're not intentional about putting it into your schedule and making it part of the rhythm in your life. And again, I hope I don't sound like you have to spend 40 hours a week with your kids. I'm not saying that at all. The things that I'm talking about don't have to take up all of your free time either. But it is a significant responsibility that you have to invest in your children, whether you have one child, 5 children, or 10. You just got to work around that as well. So another long answer for you.
Boom! Love it. Absolutely fantastic. Yeah, man. Yeah, you're absolutely right. You hit it spot on, because we won't switch an appointment for one of our clients, right? Or we accept from our clients I had this one in my head. We accept from our clients that they bitch and yell at us, right? Excuse my language. However, when my son would come in, or when our kids would come in right now and be showing him a drawing, right? We get upset because he would be interrupting our live interview conversation, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't happen with me anymore. It happened a little bit in the beginning, right? Because he actually, both of them came in my previous live interview. And now it's like, dude, man, I'm a dadpreneur. I'm a dad first and entrepreneur second. That's all part of the game for me. If they don't come in, I'm actually kind of sad because it's cool when they, interrupt that pattern, right? So, yeah. But it's curious how that works. And it was hard in the beginning, man. When you explained this, actually, like hit the nail right on the head. So I appreciate you sharing that. So let me ask you this then, because you also talked about marriage real quick. And I saw the post where you went away. Share, let's continue the whole intentional thing and share that now. You got 5 kids, right? And other responsibilities like dad hackers and all the other things that you do besides that. You also have your wife, the mother of your kids, right?
Yeah.
So what's your, I'm looking, share, please. What do you do? What can you share with us in regards to being intentional with your wife?
So a lot of the same mindset would apply that I just explained to your children, to you about children would apply to your marriage. But in some ways it's, well, obviously in a lot of ways it's different, but you have to focus on some different things. So for example, one of the things that my wife and I began to get in the rhythm of and is on Sunday night, we would sit down and plan our week out together. We'd plan out our menu. We'd plan out the grocery list. I mean, just little details like that are very important. And then we'd coordinate our schedules as well. Because one of the things that you don't want to happen, whether it's with your wife or your children, especially if you're an entrepreneur, is for them to hate what you're doing. Because that's a really bad place to be in. And then everything's a battle. And then anything that goes wrong is all because you're doing this side hustle thing. And, you don't have their support. And then it's a recipe for disaster. So one of the things that I'm learning is to communicate well and communicate often with my wife and let her know when I have podcast interviews, like today, we had a busy morning. Like the kids had swim lessons. I had an event for work. And then as soon as I got home, it was hi, give a couple kisses. And they knew that I was coming down into my workspace here for a podcast interview. They knew that. But had I not communicated that and just got home from the event that I was at and said, oh, by the way, I have another hour or so that I'm not going to be available, and you're going to have to continue on, doing the whole parenting thing on your own for another hour, that would have went over like a lead balloon. So we've got into the rhythm of planning out our weeks and coordinating calendars on Sunday evenings. It doesn't matter when you do it, just that you do it. And I recommend you do it at least on a weekly basis. And then, on a daily basis, communicate a lot about what's going on. If there's things that come up, make sure you're doing that as well and communicating those things. You got to have a date night with your wife. I would recommend weekly. Now, in our season of life, it's especially with 5 children, it's hard to get out of the house, but we do Thursday evenings. And again, depending on your schedule, you're just going to have to apply this to your certain context. Again, if you travel a lot, you're just going to have to be extra intentional and plan around those things. But on Thursday evening is typically our evening. And so we'll put the kids to bed, try to get them bed on time or a little bit early. And then we'll just hang out. Once in a great while, my mom will watch the kids or something, and we'll get to go out on an actual outside of the house date. But you can date your wife inside your house, lock the door, put up a barricade or something, so that you guys can connect. And lots of times it's just us, and we'll have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and watch Netflix or just do something mind numbing. Or the other night we we read books together, and
Mm.
just something to have adult one-on-one time and to connect. And what we've started doing over the summer is in the morning we'll take a walk together around the neighborhood, and it's just 10-15 minute walk, but man, the conversations that we get into during that time are amazing, and
Mm.
want the walk to go longer. So
Mm.
try to be intentional also about having, we call it talk time or coffee time that we have. And again, just 10 or 15 minutes, doesn't have to be super planned, elaborate, expensive. um, we have a lot of economical approaches to things. So,
Mhm.
we're doing the coffee time at home. We're doing date nights often at home. We're taking a walk around the neighborhood just because that's the season of our life. And with 5 kids, it's not as easy to get someone
Mm.
to watch 5 kids at a
Yep.
time, you know. So those are some things that we do together to be intentional.
Yeah, I love it. Actually, it's going to help me out as well because we're struggling a little bit, like how we're going to do it with our date nights. We've been very consistent when we're living in a place where we have people to watch our kids. Now it's like we don't really know people, or we know people, and we're like, not sure I want to leave my kids with,
Yeah,
right?
that's always a consideration. If I could add one more thing, and this
Absolutely.
is something that I'm learning and my wife have been discussing a lot, is that if you have a workplace that you share or whatever, and other women are there, be extremely guarded about your relationships with those other women. You could be totally pure in all of your intentions, and
Mm.
so could that other woman be pure in her intentions as well. But the fact that you have relationships with other women besides your wife is very threatening to most women.
Mm.
And it's also putting you in a very compromised position. And I'm talking about totally innocent stuff in the workplace. But lots of times we get buddy in the workplace with our coworkers, which in some circumstances, particularly between men, is totally fine.
Mhm.
But when you cross that gender barrier and begin to get buddy with other women, you're treading on very dangerous waters there,
Mm.
and very, very thin ice. And that's, while you might like to have the friends in the workplace and take coffee breaks together or lunch breaks together or go out to lunch together, um, be very, very guarded with what you do there. Like I said, even if intentions on both sides are very pure, you don't want that relationship to compromise anything in your marriage,
Mhm.
because it can, and it's not worth it.
Mhm.
Not worth it at all.
That's great advice to add on the other golden nuggets you just shared. I appreciate that.
Sure,
Uh,
man.
I hopped a little bit for myself with that thing. Um, so you have a great vision for yourself in regards to how you want which journey you want your family to go on with you, right? Leadership plays a big role in that, I'm sure. Can you share a little bit how you go about being the leader in the house that your family needs?
Sure, man. And I'll say this, another disclaimer, I'm not perfect. A lot of the things that I share, I'm learning and tweaking, and I'll say that I mess up a lot, and this is
Join
this
the
is
club.
yeah. I just say that because when I do these interviews and when we post on social media, we can come across like we have it all together and we're super disciplined and we're super consistent. But then if you had like a camcorder, if you had your iPhone and could just like videotape life inside my house on a daily basis, you would get a little bit different of a picture and a perspective. So a lot of the things I share are things that I'm implementing, learning, and growing in, and I don't have them down perfectly, and I
Mhm.
don't think I ever will. But as far as leadership is concerned, let me get to answer the question after I put that big old disclaimer up there. I think to be a good leader in your home, you have to be able to lead yourself well first, and
Mm.
leading yourself well first um, is a very big challenge.
Mhm.
And I will say that it's very difficult for me as well, because you got to constantly fight laziness, mediocrity, ambivalence, and just accepting the status quo. And that's not what I'm after. I want to fill the shoes that God has given to me, and I want to fulfill my God-given role as a husband and father and leader in my home.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I need to lead myself well in order to do that. And I think a lot of self-leadership boils down to character and self-discipline, and being consistent, and being a man of my word. Because how are you going to lead people when they can't take you seriously, if they can't trust you, if they can't depend on you? How are you going to lead them? And so all of those things fall back to like a character issue within yourself, with being a man of your word, with being truthful, being honest, being consistent, following through on what you say you're going to do. And the flip side of that piece is, analyzing commitments and opportunities that are thrown your way before you make the commitment or decide on the opportunity, whatever it may be. Because another thing that I tend to do is I tend to overcommit myself. I tend to get very engrossed in things and take on more than I can handle. And I think part of it is like an overabundance of optimism in certain areas in my life that now it's a fault, because I get overcommitted, and then then I don't follow through on what I said I'm going to do, and then it's hard to be a man of your word, and then it's hard to be consistent when you're juggling too many plates at a time. And these are, like I said, these are things that I'm learning. And so I'm learning to evaluate commitments before I make them, evaluate opportunities, make sure they align with my principles and my core values before I move forward in certain areas. Be careful about the things that I say to my wife and to my children, as far as I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, or even yes or no. With kids, like if you tell them, Dad, can I have this? And you say no, then they come back 5 minutes later and ask the same question, and then the answer is yes. Well, you've just taught them that all you need is a little bit of nagging, and your no doesn't really mean no until they've nagged you a little bit, and then it'll mean yes. You know what I'm saying? But then I feel like that just detracts and deteriorates your character in your word. And what I want to be is a man who, when I say yes, it means yes. And when I say no, it means no. And when I say I will do this, it's as if it's already done, because you can count on me for doing it. And so all of those things, again, fall back into character issues within yourself and integrity. And I think it's a big area for a lot of guys, is we want to kind of play the part and act the part, but then it's not really the part that we are. You know what I'm saying? So.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that. I was actually thinking, you were saying like, when I say no, it just means that you have to try harder until you get a yes.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know it's a bad message, but is it really? Because as soon as we grow up and somebody else tells us no, it's no right away, right? We just accept it. While, for example, in business, like sales or whatever it is, no and trying it a different way or trying harder might be actually a good thing. But still, I know actually what you mean. I think it was also Aaron who was saying like, he was sharing a lesson from his mom, saying like, look, say yes as often as possible.
Right.
However, when you say no, they gotta know it is no, and that's it. Don't come back to it. They gotta know.
Right. And I think lots of times we say no too much because what they're asking isn't necessarily wrong or out of line. It just is interrupting our agenda or what we want to do. And it's infringing on our selfishness. And so we just say no, like, no, get out of my hair. But like when we became fathers, that's what we signed up for, whether we knew it or not, whether we intentionally became a father or it was like an accident. That's the situation you're in now. And again, I struggle with this as well. I've told my kids no probably today to something that I didn't need to say no to. It was just something that was going to interrupt my agenda. And so for that, I would say in that circumstance, really evaluate why you're saying no. Like if your son asks, can my buddy sleep over tonight? And you say no, because you had some plans for this evening. Wink, wink. Really evaluate. Are you being selfish in that moment? Do you really need to say no? And you may change your mind, or just random requests that you get throughout the day. Just take 5 seconds, step back from it, and really think: do I need to say no? And that principle of saying yes as often as possible is a very good principle. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I thought it was a nice add to your story, and I'm trying. It's like you said, man, because yes, on social media, and it's not just that what we share, then people might see us as like, wow, they look perfect. I keep sharing. That's why my business is called Become a Fearless Father, because I am not. I'm far from it, and I keep sharing that as well.
Yeah.
Also is with social media, there are those that are proclaiming like, look, man, I am the perfect dad, or I am the perfect marketer, or whatever it is, right? And in my opinion, look, man, you want to be perfect, that's fine, but it doesn't exist, right? It's a continuous journey. And that's why I really love your story, because you're sharing right now that it's like, look, it is a journey, right?
Yeah.
And enjoy it and learn from it and keep learning and enjoying and sharing with your kids. Again, coming back to the, and I'm going to say it right, to the multi-generational legacy, right?
Yeah.
So that can just come true as well. I love it, man. Thank you so much for being on. I'm really enjoying myself and all our stuff. So let me ask you this, because you said like you've done a lot of interviews with other dads and other inspiring people for your podcast, right? I have noticed that one of the best things I've ever done is starting these live interviews. Not just for my audience, but being really selfish for a second for me.
Oh, yeah.
Like every single live interview that I've done, I've gotten out at least 3 golden nuggets, if not more, right? So do me a favor. Try to think right now, what would be a great lesson that you've learned from someone else during your interviews that would be amazing to share with other dadpreneurs?
I mean, I think what you just said is exactly my experience, and I'll trail off for just a second to say this. I get so much out of the interviews when I conduct them, and lots of times I'll go back upstairs and talk to my wife, and she'll say, "How was it?" Wait, let me guess. It was amazing, because I usually go up and I'm like, man, it's just, I learned so much. But one thing that I was thinking about in this concept and this principle can apply in both marriage and fatherhood. But the guy that I was talking to, his name is Matt Jacobson, and he's like a marriage expert. I think he has like 8 kids. Some of them are grown and out of the house. Some of them are a little bit younger. And he's one of those guys that like has his stuff together. And he's well on his way to having that multi-generational impact.
Nice.
And one of the things that we talked about in our interview was about expectations. And lots of times we go into our relationship, whether it be with our wife or our children, thinking, if I do this, then they're going to do that.
Yep, guilty.
Yeah. And then when they don't do that thing that we were hoping they would do, we get upset. And 2 things there. Number one, first, we may not have communicated our expectations, and then we get upset when they don't meet our expectations or fulfill our desires in the way that we wanted them to, and then we get upset. But they never knew in the first place that was our expectation. The second thing is, and this was in the context of trying to kind of like rebuild a marriage or rebuild a relationship, and this is how you can apply this, is like, you be the man that you're supposed to be. You work on your character, you work on your integrity, you work on your honesty, you work on your consistency, you work on those things, and you drive forward and invest in the relationship as you're supposed to on your end, and leave the results up to God, and leave what the other person's response to it is up to them. But you still do the right thing no matter what the outcome is. And because we were talking about guys that are near divorce, or guys that are in relationships where things are really, really strained. And lots of times we think, if I just do these right couple of steps, then my wife is going to respond and reciprocate, and things going to be perfect. And I was like, well, what happens if it doesn't? But you still have to be working on yourself. You still have to lead well, even if you don't get the response that you were after. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What I'm trying to communicate there to you. Just because they might not respond in the way that you think they should because you did this, that, or the other thing, doesn't excuse you from being the man that you're supposed to be. I guess
right
is the lesson I'm trying to there.
No, it's a great lesson. So many of us trying to serve, doesn't matter if it's your wife or whoever, with an intention of getting something back, right?
Right. Is it really serving then?
Exactly. That's the thing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I cleaned the house, so now my wife's got to give me, whatever it is.
I know what it is. Yeah.
So, but yeah, I've learned that the hard way as well.
Yeah.
You don't get that special time. It's like, she doesn't love me. Oh, why doesn't she do this? Why doesn't she do that?
Yeah.
Man,
and then that's just, I feel like that's just the enemy trying to drive a wedge in your relationship between you and her, because a good solid marriage with a good solid family is like unheard of for the most part in our cultures and societies. But so much can be done with a good, strong family unit. It's the basic building block of society, is that a good, strong, solid family. And you destroy a family, you destroy society. And that's a lot of the agenda out there today, is to destroy.
Yeah, right on. Absolutely. Great, man. I loved it. Yeah, tons of fun, and tons of new notes, tons of new things that I'm going to be working on, especially, man, I'm going to start building a multi-generational legacy for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure you're already doing things that contribute toward that. But now that it's on the radar, you can be even more intentional about it and kick it up a notch.
Exactly. That's it. So you'll be hearing more from me in the near future. Anyway, let me find it, because where did I leave it? Right here. All right. So right before we get off, right? So everybody, you can follow Patrick and see everything, and dadhackers.us. What are other ways, or is this just the best way, or what are other ways to get in contact with you, follow you? Maybe dadpreneurs here have been listening and like, dude, man, that was interesting. I got more questions. You only got me more curious, and I got more questions now.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that's the primary way, is dadhackers.us, and on there's links to the podcast. There's links to our private Facebook group. We have, we're on all the social media. Mostly do Facebook, and mostly do primarily the Facebook group, and the podcast are where I concentrate most of my time with Dad Hackers. So those are the two great places. You can email me, patrick@dadhackers.us. That's totally cool. I'm on Facebook, so you can friend me up if you want to, or just shoot me a message. I check my other folder for message requests, so I know about that. So yeah, feel free to reach out, and if you want to join the group, I'd love to have you in there. I asked 3 questions. Make sure you answer those. It helps us make the group better.
Absolutely. Yep, that's very important. Yeah, I've deleted many that don't answer the questions. I think that I'm going to have them join. Even women, which is even more.
Yeah, I don't get that one.
Yeah. Hey, man, that happens. Anyway, again, Patrick, thank you so much for being on. Thanks for sharing all these insights. I absolutely loved it. Very powerful stuff you shared with us. Everybody else that's shared their time with us for an hour, I really appreciate you. And as you know, if you're listening to this as a recording, you can find the links in the description. So you just have to click on it and can immediately check out Patrick's website. That said, also, and I keep repeating this, I'm going to be repeating this probably until the day I die. If you find a golden nugget from everything that Patrick has been sharing with us, take action. Don't just listen to it. Don't just write it down, which is the great next step. But it only works if you take action and find out for yourself if it works or if it doesn't. And that also will generate more questions, which, as Patrick said, he is more than happy to, be open and hear your question and help you out. So again, thanks everybody. Have an amazing day, and I will talk to you guys again tomorrow. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Are you still meeting up with your friends now that you're a father? Kids making you stress out. You got no time for yourself to work out, read, or relax. Can you still remember the time you were hanging out with your friends, feeling energetic, happy, and confident? Spending time together and talking about your life and your crazy dreams. You're feeling alone now, don't you? No one to share your challenges with, and you're just running around from one storm into the next. Well, it's time to change this now. Join me and the Brotherhood of Fearless Fathers to speak on a weekly basis with like-minded dads to crush your challenges, face your fears with determination, be held accountable, and regain control of your life. If you want to become the hero your family needs you to be, then go to becomeafearlessfather.com/brotherhood. I'm looking forward to seeing you on one of our next calls.